Good evening, everybody. I'm John O'Loughlin, and it's what is it? Wednesday night, Wednesday night, October the 12th, 2021. And I'm glad to welcome to the show once again David Underdown. David, thanks very much for joining us. It's been 2 weeks, and a lot has happened since then. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing okay. Just trying to follow along with everybody's shows and keep doing self-study to try to help as much as I can.
Thank you. That's pretty much what I've been doing too, and everybody else. We're all working on this big question of how can we uncover the truth. I mean, they said the truth would set us free. They didn't say how to find it, So we all are trying our best to uncover the truth, and that we go at it from different angles. Uh, Mark Kulak, who is here. Hi, Mark. What and I were talking earlier today about how important it is to study the history behind what's going on today, because if you don't study the history, then you cannot understand at all what's going on. So, yeah, and I know that of all people, you know that very well because you work at it very, very hard to pick up on the history that we have not been told. And so, in combination with yourself and many other people, let's keep going. Let's get on onto our subjects for tonight. So I always find that you've got something interesting on your mind. Let's find out what you've been working on most recently.
Well, I've been listening to the Eustace Mullins new World Order book, which I find very interesting. I feel it's very focused on the Federal Reserve. For people that don't know him as an author, I didn't know him until just really recently, and he wrote a very important book about the history of the Federal Reserve. His goal was to try to sort of to unmask the Federal Reserve Bank shareholders and who they were. And for me, it's very key to understand the banking relationships and how they evolve over time, because there is a lot of deception and rebranding of banks over time. So he does a really good job of really illustrating what I think are very important characters to know from history, because as you said, I think it's impossible if you just look in current history. You have to have a background in a lot of what's been done before to really make sense of it, because the information as it's presented is to me is they use different strategies, limited hangouts, ignoring certain facts, just to basically, I think, frustrate people so that they'll go to a different activity as opposed to digging through history and trying to link together networks to kind of understand what what we're up against. One of the key points that Mullins makes is that the goal of this new order is to confuse people so that they don't know who their enemy is, or who's attacking them, basically, and that they'll spend all their time attacking the wrong people. And that's something that I'm very sensitive to with my family and personal connections of my life, just trying to make sense of it, because for whatever reason I've had a lot of characters that are related to my own life experiences in my family. So trying to try to understand that too is a real driver for me, just because my none of it was explained to me, and it's really it's hard because I struggle with my family, because they really are it's just overwhelming for them. They can't follow along. It's too many characters. So I really am trying to, understand key characters so that I can, not just say a bunch of names that no one can relate to, and make sense of it and try to explain it in a way that's understandable for people and helpful.
I've been looking into a very interesting guy named General Arthur Trudeau, who
Hmm.
was the head of the Army's intelligence section devoted to innovations and new technology. And his amazing story has never really been told. So I'm suggesting him as somebody to look into. But from a lot of my recent reading, it's become apparent to me that this struggle that we're facing now was going on in the Roosevelt administration.
Yep.
In the sense that you had at that time people who were completely convinced that other people in the cabinet were communists and traitors and needed to be called out and gotten rid of. Whereas you had on the other side these kind of egg-headed liberal types that anytime they got criticized would call out the right wing for being overly well, for being conservative and for not protecting the general public. But the the point is that this struggle in the Roosevelt administration is uh, is so important, and because you have this guy, General Trudeau, who calls out people like McGeorge Bundy and says that guy is a traitor. That guy is a communist. And all of that stuff was blown off the page by the McCarthy hearings, which once people got it had it up to here with McCarthy and thought, this guy's just going over the top, it's too much. Well, that sealed it. And nobody's really looking anymore back behind the McCarthy hearings into the characters that really did contribute to this divided government, where you had John Foster Dulles on one side, with all of his people, but who's on the other side? I'd say Douglas MacArthur is on the other side, and a number of very powerful Congress people. Um, in terms of looking at Roosevelt, I am also interested in the influence of Roosevelt from his uncle Delano and
Hmm.
the Delano family's obvious connection to the dope trade. Because I've been thinking, why did the Navy make a deal with the mafia to protect the ports of New York, instead of just doing it themselves or hiring somebody that wasn't already, that just tinged with this underworld criminality? Is there a story here to be told about how the Roosevelt was in some way controlled by his uncle Delano and those financial interests enough to say let the camel's nose under the tent, let the mafia operate the ports, because if that hadn't happened, then how would they have gotten so many people addicted to heroin, through the Harlem and all of the terrible just distribution that went on. It, and at first into black communities and then Latinos, but then ultimately they just sell it to everybody. The beginning of this goes back to World War II. Well, I've said a lot. I'll let you contribute if you have anything to put on top of what I just said.
Well, I think that I didn't know much about FDR or the Roosevelt family. Eustace Mullins does talk quite a bit about their that Delano side, and they were in with the Russell and Company and the Perkins, which were the big East India Company American franchises in Boston that we've studied, and then the Russell Company becomes the Russell Trust, which is the Skull and Bones at Yale. Um, so there is quite I like whenever I think of the trade companies like East India Company or the Dutch West India Company, there's I think of them as franchises and not necessarily that they're independent from that system. I think that they're the American agents, sort of the crown agents for, uh, you know, running the different goods and trade. They say that every bank was originally a dry goods merchant originally. We've gotten into the Pottingers with their history with the East India Company, doing the Opium Wars and then becoming the first governor of Hong Kong. So that system is also tied to the American companies. The Hongs were basically a place of exchange where they would have basically the Hong is like a booth that the different companies would rent and then use as to trade their different goods. With opium being very profitable. Um, but that the Russell Company was in there, the Dent Company, the Jardine Matheson was a big trader as well. So just sort of trying to learn that system, how it evolved, from the Silk Roads and then to the Age of Sail. There are changes to how the things are moved, how the goods are moved. The Hong Kong system was, originally they were smuggling the heroin from Bengal in India into Hong Kong, and the emperor was requiring the trade to be settled in silver bullion, and that was logistically a big problem, to be sending all of the bullion plus that it's hard. It takes a long time to move it. It's takes up cargo space. So for them, it was a big advantage to be able to take the opium from a nearby port in India and then to exchange it in Hong Kong legally. Where before that's why they had the Opium War, was because they were smuggling it, and the emperor didn't want them to be, obviously getting their people addicted. It's a infiltration strategy to weaken the people of China. And I really think that what we're facing right now is the same strategy. They're using the synthetics, fentanyl and different different drug products like that. But it is important to learn those events, because it does sort of guide you to where we are now. A lot of the stuff with the pandemic and how to approach that. It's the drug company. It's the same drug companies that are running these operations. I mean, Bayer was the legal heroin broker, which was a German company, but it's just trying to understand how we can get to where we are now, where they're basically using the same strategy of dividing people into different groups, and then getting the people fighting where they don't really know who they're supposed to be going after. So just trying to understand you know who the original banks and trade merchants are that they're really running the same operations they have for 400 years. So that's what I'm trying to understand, because it is it's really hard. I mean, I was learning about the history of the Tavistock today and their role in psychological operations with basically for the Bank of England. They were they were the propagandists of their day, and they discovered that using narcotics was a great way to enhance their influence and their ability to you know you know either target certain people or destabilize the population. So just trying to understand what those different groups are. I know it's a lot to take in, and I'm trying to sort it all out. But it is a lot of the same characters, with new branding and different techniques of hiding themselves through different corporations, or with different media. It evolves, but it's really the same banking interests, which is why this book that I've been following is so interesting to me, because it is a lot of the key players. And I feel like most people don't even know the names of the banks that were the main crown agents, like a Kuhn and Loeb. I feel like that's a bank that a lot of people don't understand. You know, they were basically the one half of the Bank of England in America, with J.P. Morgan being sort of the other at the beginning of the 20th century. And then you get into the Brown Brothers, Harriman, being also associated with the Bank of England, with the Norman Montague, being basically the main interest in Brown Shipley, which was the British company, which was partnered with the um, Brown Brothers in America. So it is a lot of repeat of the same characters, but it's hard, because they really boost a lot of people and make heroes out of them, and you spend a lot of uh, media attention on certain people to give them a very favorable public opinion, and to be sort of the one that's discrediting heroes is a really hard role to play. So that's kind of what I feel like I'm doing, is trying to understand the real network.
Yeah. I saw Andy had put up the Alexander Brown and his background. He he is said to be an Irish merchant. More sometimes they say Irish, but there really are more on the British in terms of the Irish versus British thing. Well, they might live in Ireland, but be on the more of the UK uh, persuasion. But that's right. That story, I've read it about Brown, and then he gets involved back in London, and all of this stuff really is intentionally made obscure by people like the Tavistock Institute, uh, all working for the banks, as you said in the beginning. That it is the banks that want the obscurity, that cause it to make people be unable to know who your friends are. It sounds a lot like what I've been reading in Rulers of Evil um, about the Jesuits, that these are Machiavellian tactics or Sun Tzu tactics, that the idea that you always will be able to win if you out if you defeat the other side with intelligence, with studying them, with knowing what their habits are, and then actually get agents into their thinking, so that you would be able to persuade them to walk right into your trap. And and to do that, as a Jesuit, you have sworn loyalty to the Pope. The Pope is God's mouthpiece on earth. So if God's mouthpiece on earth says that you can do this, well, you can do it. And so they do. And it's incredible to us to think that religious people would actually do things that set wars in motion, that enable horrible things to happen, where they have this super um, get out of jail free card, that they can just do whatever they want, get and still go to heaven. It's not doing whatever they want, though. It is the design and the long-term plans that go into this type of Machiavellian warfare that we are being subjected to right now. And the things that confuse us are there to confuse us. And the one other thing that we've been reading in rulers of evil is how the media is a production of the Catholic Church, the imperial side of the Catholic Church that says, well, we are entitled to run all the means of communication. It doesn't matter if it's television, radio, anything. We can run it. So if you look at our media with a jaundiced eye uh, and say, you know, everything that I am absorbing when I watch television has been put through that whole process in order to maintain my state of confusion, where, you know, I don't really ever get to know what's going on anymore. And sometimes they'll tell you the truth, but, you know, phrases like, here's what we know, authorities say, um, scientists say, you know, and then they give us this stuff and we're supposed to believe it. No, I would like to have that authority on the witness stand so I could cross-examine them before I decide whether I'm going to believe them or not. Uh, That's another gripe I have is we don't have any adversarial conversations about anything. I've been trying to strike up an adversarial conversation with some people about the issue of this medication that they've been wanting us all to absorb into our bodies. And you know, I can't engage somebody in a logical, you know, discourse. Um, that's part of the problem is that we don't even know how to have a decent argument without just getting mad and throwing mud at each other anymore. Um, some people do, you know, the ones that go to the Ivy League schools, the Christopher Hitchenses, and the people that really put their lives into that type of endeavor of being eloquent and learning how to use their sharp wit to elucidate it to well to elucidate truth, but also simply to to destroy the other person's version of reality. That is what I would like to see somebody, you know, get up there on the mask versus no mask thing and say, let's have a real honest debate. I mean, come on, let's go at it. Put everything up there on the board. Have a big whiteboard. Not that is the media, and the reason that we don't get anything from the media is because the media is totally controlled by these same forces. Is it the church that's controlling the media now today, or is it the banks? Well, I submit to you that it's the same thing. Just like in the Roman Empire, it was the priests, you know, in the temples that had control over the money. You know, that's where the money was, in the temples. And so at this point, I can see a Pope Francis, who is a Jesuit, just thinking, well, God put me in charge of all this stuff, and I can just do whatever I want to think that's whatever's right. And so, yeah, we'll tell some lies. We'll let the media control and use this word casuistry, casuistry, which is a term that means that you can take the facts and put whatever gloss on them you want to in order to make the historical narrative sound right from a from the point of view of the empire or the Christian empire, or from the point of view really of the narrative writers that sit in those cubicles in the 29th floor of the banks and work late writing narratives that they're going to sell to us in the next edition of the news tomorrow.
Well, I you know, I agree with that. I don't know if necessarily like one thing is I struggle with just blaming like one organization because I always think it's a you know a cartel of you know different different interests. You know, obviously um you know old organization, but I also like to look at history in what I consider like super cycles of how information and signal comms are shared. And you've talked about in the recent readings about the introduction of the printing press and allowing messaging to be outside of the monks that do the translation, or do the writing by hand, and then going to a more automated system. And then I also look at going to the radio system, having improved signal comms, through telegraph, and then through the telephone system, and then radio, and then going to television, which is very personal to me, because my grandfather on my mom's side he was an electrical and mechanical engineer for RCA. And as I'm learning, RCA is one of the truly powerful corporations of America. It was formed with Serco, which is basically the British version of RCA. And the man that was running it was David Sarnoff, who was very linked to the banking interests. And they had NBC and CBS kind of all sprung from the RCA. So again, like, if you go back in time, you can see where they control it, because it is such a critical element of persuasion, is to control the messaging. And then we go later into studying Alan Dulles doing a focal point system, as far as strategically positioning people within organizations where it's not obvious, very interested in. And then obviously, during, the having, the internet becoming the new super cycle of information sharing, and how that's, we see them trying to control free speech, different uh, different politicians, talking about, um, monitoring and censoring different social media platforms. But it's really, to me, it is going back to the same groups, that DARPA, being the founder of the internet. Mark Kulak's done a lot of very interesting research on the ARPANET and how that was started, with the select universities. But that was another thing that I really picked up on from the Mullins reading, was the strategy of going from corporations and having like an East India company, to going to the foundations, and rinsing the assets through the university system and through foundations. And the first one was the Peabody in the, I think, 1850 was the first foundation. And then they really kicked it up when they did the Federal Reserve Act. They had the Carnegie Institute was created, I believe, in 1913 as well, and the Rockefeller Foundation. And again, looking at who who created those systems, and it was Elihu Root and Frederick T. Gates that were the lawyers, and then Henry Stimson was the partner of Root, and they also created the Council on Foreign Relations in the same era. So again, the idea of the executive and the legislative and the judicial branch being the main drivers of policy and ideas, I think hasn't been around for 100 years. I do think that they use foundations and think tanks to create policy. I mean, we see it with these massive budgets, that they don't even read, and there's no time to read it. They're too, voluminous to even have the Congress go through it. So again, it's, knowing who to really target is really important, because you can spend all your time, being mad at your congressperson. But a lot of times I feel like they're, following the direction of these these key foundations like, Rockefeller, Carnegie, Ford Foundation, Brookings, this uh,
Sorry, I think we're having some bandwidth problems to get
yeah.
your audio, David. We heard everything up to Brookings Institution, and then it cut
So
off.
yeah, I was just talking about like the kind of the key policy think tanks that really
Yeah.
create a lot of the policies, like Brookings being a key one. CSIS at Georgetown was where Kissinger and Brzezinski ended up in the late 70s. Um, Carnegie, as Mark Kulak has really shown, is very influential. But there's a lot of crossover in those in those institutions with the banking, the banking interest, and also the same law firms. A lot of times are the historically the same groups that draw that up. And one of the companies that I've really been looking at is Bechtel, which I know you with your father being the classmate of one of the key Bechtel characters, George Schultz. They were, from what I understand, they were really a subsidiary of the Schroeder Bank, which was a German bank that was
Wow.
very involved in financing the Nazis, but also had Percy Rock or Avery Rockefeller was the American franchise in New York, with the with Allen and John Foster Dulles also being directors of the Schroeder Bank, which was one of the original Bank of International Settlement groups. But they were really the financing end of the Bechtel, which was Standard Oil of California's. They built the original pipelines for them, and they were also did the super projects like the Trans-Arabian Pipeline. They did the Yukon Pipeline, which was again ties into the strategic naval petroleum reserves. So they're really in the I again like try to really focus on the companies that really had a lot of influence, because Bechtel then with Reagan, he was very closely associated with Hoover Institute, um, in Stanford. They they had Schultz as the Secretary of State, and then Caspar Weinberger was the chief counsel for them, who again, like learning about the Iran Contra affair, he was the involved in that. So it's a lot of the same groups. There were a couple other. I think they said half of Reagan's cabinet was Bechtel um, affiliated people. So again, just trying to like get into the companies that really are doing infrastructure building. And then the other one was the Kellogg Root and Brown, which was Lyndon Johnson was really closely affiliated with them, and they did a lot of the super project building, a lot of military uh, infrastructure. And then in Vietnam, they were known as the builders of the Vietnam War, was KRB. So again, just trying to get the names out there so that people are familiar with, who I think are really key groups and organizations that are hopefully helpful in understanding where we are now, because they are driven again by these sort of same you know think tanks that come up with the policy.
And yeah, very good. And I want to just kind of put my arms all the way around all that stuff and say that the folks that you're identifying, these powerful people, families, corporations that go back in history and are still so powerful right now behind the scenes, um, they are there doing things that look like they're immoral, they're anti-human, they're anti-democratic, they're anti-constitutional. They seem to be able to do things that we are told from birth not to do, from our parents, from our teachers, from our mentors, religious leaders, baseball coaches. Everybody says, be good. Don't do things to people that you wouldn't want them to do to you. And yet these are the companies, these are the ones that are doing that all around the world all the time, taking resources away from people in so-called third world countries, keeping Africa poor. You know, they did it to Ireland, keeping Ireland poor. They will do that in violation of all the basic moral principles that we as humans are supposed to obey. And we sit here kind of slack-jawed, thinking, well, how do they do that? How can they grow up in the same country, the same world, breathing the same air that I do, and do these horrible things over and over, starting world wars just to make money? Which is, you talk about the Schroeder Bank and the Prescott Bush and all of those folks. They pushed the world into war just to make money, to concentrate the wealth, and also to get rid of a lot of potential competition among the young males of the time. Just get rid of them. Just and if war no longer is possible, which is what we're being told now, that because of the nuclear bomb, we have a mutually assured destruction, and so we can't do that. Well, heck, we're going to have to get rid of those people somehow. Maybe we should consider bioweapons, and that's how we get to it from a shooting war to somebody actually creating these weapons, and then somebody actually leaving the door open, or whatever you want to say, letting it happen. That unthinkable crime that has been committed over and over and over again in our world. When we see these people, these organizations, then when we can't just try to argue with them. This is my point. I will mention this about my good friends at the Schiller Institute, that they are all about telling us what we need to do to make things better. Right? We need to build the Belt and Road, or we need to free the money from Afghanistan, the money being held back, or we need to improve the energy flux density, or we need to build more nuclear power, or all of these great solutions. The trouble with, if all you do is propose solutions, you're not confronting the problem, because the problem is that all of these, you know, soulless corporations and foundations and entities that have been built upon uh, old wealth being laundered, and old dope money and old trafficking money, and all of this stuff being somehow gotten into our legitimate financial system through the loss of Glass-Steagall. We're dealing right now with the philosophy that is behind all of this abuse of humanity. And that philosophy, whether you call it the Fabian socialism, or just totalitarianism, or just plain greed, there is a real philosophy behind this, and it's not ignorance. It is intentional. That's what I'm trying to say. We need to not only know who these people are, but we need to be ready to call them out and to say, no, that's not what humans are supposed to do. You're not supposed to do that to fellow humans. And stop talking about scarcity, because there's plenty of everything if you all would just get off of uh, the legal impediments you keep throwing at us in either patent law or copyrights, or just creating artificial scarcity by buying up all the water rights, or polluting everything. I'm on a rant, man, but I'm telling you, I've been watching this my whole life. I'll be 69 years old on Sunday, and I can't I can't see a whole lot of progress unless we start waking everybody up. And that's, you know, the names that you throw out there have been lionized as heroes, as you said. And you're an iconoclast, and I'm an iconoclast, and we are not going to let those false idols, uh, you know, to rule the minds of the next generations of our people. We can't. We've got to take them down. We've got to take them off the pedestal, and that's what you're doing. So, thank you.
Well, another Fletcher Prouty talked about the Malthusianism also, which is Thomas Malthus was a East India Company professor that was teaching philosophy, and my understanding of that is basically getting people to um, lose empathy for different classes or different people, just basically to accept that bad things happen to people because they live in a poor country, or they don't have the same educational uh, options, or infrastructure built for basically being part of what I see as sort of the East India system, where again, it's like a getting people into the idea that just it's really just the caste system of having a higher class and then a lower class, and then if these people get sick, then you just write it off. Well, they were they were doomed anyway, or they didn't have any hopes anyway. So to again, focus on something else, and that's something that's always been hard for me, because I did go, I went to a school that was a Milner's kindergarten type program. It was the smartest affluent people in the Detroit area, and but I was in class with all these different you know religions and ethnicities, and they were all they were the best and the brightest of everything. And I was always just like felt like everybody came from a nice family, and that they were similar to my family. They were really interested in the education, and um getting into a good college. So it is sad to think that that system is really you know I felt like I was right in that system. And I of course went to Boston College, and I'm not Catholic. I was somebody that because I went to a private school, when I would go to Sunday school, I was always the only person that didn't go to the public school. So I was always sort of teased, and so I really didn't look forward to going to the I didn't relate to the religion at all, but I was always very interested in it, because we'd all celebrate the different holidays and learn about the traditions of the different cultures, and that was always been very interesting to me. But it is it's hard, because I you know you I felt like I was right in there, and again, it's just hard. I don't know. I guess I'm just somebody that never we talked about with my grandparents on my mom's side being from southern Indiana, and I didn't know about the New Harmony colony there. That was really like the foundation of communism in America, was Robert Owen, and he was a crown agent from for the East India Company, and they never talked about that. And like his kids were the founder of Indiana University and the founder of Purdue University, where my relatives all went to school. But they you know again, it's hard learning this stuff, because I felt like I know a lot of the characters, and I was around all these um different groups, but I really didn't see that as being the system. And so it makes it hard, because that I went to school with families that are really like heavily involved with a lot of this stuff, especially being from Detroit, with General Motors and Ford and Chrysler, and different you know influential people, like within those organizations. And I don't know, it's like I feel like I met the families and everything, and just didn't see it. But you go out there, and this I do believe that that is the system that is really, taught. And I don't know, I guess maybe that's, why I, don't get out much or whatever, because I just was very frustrated um, with a lot of my interactions with people. And most people are obviously wonderful, but there is that small group of people that just, I don't want to say psychopath or sociopaths, but there are people that are obviously playing by a different set of rules and have different drives. And I'm always somebody that tries to really understand people and, observe them and try to figure out what their interests and drives are. And there were certain people that just really confused me. And I do sadly think that those are the ones that really end up, at the top of these organizations. Cause like you said, they need to have that was what they said about Elihu Root. He was somebody that they said that nobody else could get it done. He's the one that if you gave him the assignment, he would get it done no matter what. And that's what Prouty said about Alan Dulles. He seemed like a meek professor, but he would get it done. And he, just, seemed like a meek, mild guy, but he was driven, whether it was his, Calvinism, that he felt like he was, entitled to do anything, but I also see those characters as, in the servitor class, but they are, ones that really will, and that's the thing, is that I don't think it's a lot. I feel like they're very smart about the way they organize it, where they do pick out these key characters like a Henry Kissinger, who, is just will do, anything. And again, with the wars and the overthrows, another thing that I think is a main driver of that is busting contracts, as far as if you have like drilling rights or mineral rights. If you change the government, then you can change those contracts. And it seems like a lot of the overthrows were when, the leader would want to nationalize petroleum or something like that, and that's when they would be gone, because they, wouldn't agree to the terms that were basically imposed upon them, and then they would get somebody in there that would do it. So again, just trying to learn who those groups are, and how it started. You can go very far back, but just to try to understand the different groups.
I see folks are making some comments in the chat room about the Southwest Airlines, and that's an interesting story in the news. Have you been following it?
A little bit. I always think back to my college. I was in the Carroll School of Management at BC, and we did the case study, the Harvard Business School, case study on Southwest Airlines. And the guy that founded it was this really, like, he would do stuff like he would crawl up into the overhead compartments and like pop out and like scare the people, and like was supposed to be like this kind of, you know, he changed the route system, as far as like lowering prices for airfares and stuff like that. But those are all things that it's hard, because like I'm somebody that's always, like, fortunately, like, not had a lot of illness. I'm somebody that is afraid of a lot of medicine. I just it's hard for me to get into the mindset um, of preventative medicine. That's just a concept that is very foreign to just like basic logic for me. So, again, I feel like the strategy is to get, half the people that are for it and half the people that are against it, and then, fight for it. But it's hard, because like even within my own family, I feel like I've failed at that argument to sort of, wait, and if you get sick, then take something. Um, but most people trust their doctor. And I mean, have had some situations where different medicine has really helped me in specific situations. So it's not that I don't believe that medicine can be helpful. It's just that the whole thing is I mean, I remember the first charrette and just like the initial press conferences, and I was just like, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It just, I didn't, like everybody was so scared because, you just don't know what's out there. And again, like, if you're going to be dark and scare a whole population, like you're going to make it, it's not going to be easy to figure out what they're doing. So, my family is all, my parents and sister, they did it. And of course I was, really nervous. I mean, I still am now because, again, like studying the history of, Jonas Salk and, what happened with polio. But, even my parents, they look back and still think that, that they, saved people. And I don't think they're really aware of the complications. But again, just like with, again, like with the First Amendment crackdowns on people, that just is really hard. It's it's very unsettling to me because, again, I feel like people have very specific reasons besides just being skeptical in general. I think about Mark talking about his wife and her um, history, and sensitivity to any kind of medication. And I feel like there are people that, there are a lot of people like that have, personal experiences that are really bad, yet they're not allowed to explain that. And again, like people like my dad, I was we were talking about like the hospital workers that are giving up their careers, because they believe that. And his response was, well, they're not following the rules and they should be punished and they should lose their jobs. And for me, I think of it as, well, you got to look at it more of a case by case basis, because you don't know the what that person's health is. And another problem I have is understanding baseline health for people, because like I'm somebody that loves numbers and statistics. And so, like, I always want to measure change. So, and to give these authoritative statements about, well, we saved this many people because of it, like, I don't know that. Like, I don't know what the person's baseline health was to start, and I don't know, how accurately they can measure it. um in a lot of ways. I mean, I was really ruined from that, from doing, again, like my finance classes. I was, learning how to do, basically, valuation methods. And I saw right away that when you're, using an expected rate of return, and that's an assumption that you make, but you can change it a couple basis points, and you can really make a dramatic change in what your overall projection is, especially like over a long-term projection. So I'm somebody that's just skeptical of numbers and statistics, the ability to collect it and report it. Um, Besides even just, like you said, massaging information to fit the narrative you want. um, I feel like there's human error in the testing, or, are the tests effective? Are they able to tell the difference between the different strains, things like that, where they, have our top, medical professionals saying that. But again, like, I don't know. I don't have a way of measuring it. So I feel like, um, there are different situations, but I'm, just the whole presentation of it, the rollout of it was really, you know, again, like, I was focused on like the fact that petroleum market inverted, at the same time. And then we had warp speed, where it's, $5 trillion just like, out of nothing, you know, to to basically build up our stockpile of medicine, or, work on, drug discovery. And again, having the top, the Treasury Secretary saying that, arguing that, adding that much money to the money supply won't cause inflation, or, transitory is the word they love to use. But, again, I'm somebody that's proven wrong constantly on this stuff, because I'm just, concerned about the national debt, the funded liabilities aspect of it, which is never really discussed. And, I see our country, having this huge debt burden. And then people trying to explain that, oh, well, if you do this bailout package, it won't have any effect on the, it won't. And that's just not, what I learned in my, macroeconomics class or whatever, my freshman year of college. And, it just goes against that. But again, it's like, who am I to argue against the Treasury Secretary? So it's a hard it's hard because, again, like, as you said, they get a person that is very credentialed and well spoken, and you know looks like they are know what they're talking about. And I filter the information, and it's just hard for me because now I get into arguments with my family over this stuff because they're going to go with the heads of these organizations. But as we're uncovering, they're kind of all, like with the Bechtel, with the Reagan group, they're all sort of affiliated with the same groups. And then you look at, like, our, you name it, the head of the FBI, the head of the CIA, the head of the Justice Department, they all have the same legacy. So again, it's like, it's hard because, I want to try to understand this and explain it to people, but you have to be able to explain it in a way that is going against the most trusted voices.
Well, you started talking about somebody that you identified as a Crown agent in southern Indiana, and now we've gone to the point where now we have these inexplicable power centers everywhere, and I suggest to you that they are the result of the Crown agents that were planted 100 years ago. And these agents may be of the British Crown, maybe of the British banking system in the City of London, maybe from other financial centers that I don't know. Maybe the Bank of International Settlements in Switzerland has something to do with all this. All of that stuff is going to be uncovered. But you started, you've got a good place to start pulling on the string from. You say, well, you can identify this whole thing as come from a Crown agent, and we've spoken about Crown agents many times. These are the people that the British Crown sent out to the colonies to make sure that they got their cut out of every bit of transportation that landed in a port. And that idea persists today in the sense of, I think people like Oliver North are Crown agents.
Hmm.
People that are working at high levels in our secret operations are Crown agents. They're really agents of the financial system that is incredibly beyond anybody's ability even to conceive of how bankrupt it is. It is more bankrupt than all the bankruptcies that have ever been bankrupt in the bankrupt universe. That is the
Yeah.
most bankrupt thing that has ever been seen in any universe is our financial system right now. And what Mark said the other day, he said, I wonder if they're not just keeping us alive, keeping our country alive long enough so that they can run their experiments with these experimental medications. Maybe that's the only reason that they're letting us keep keep our our country going. And the country is so far in debt. But I agree with the Schiller folks that the answer is not that we, the American people, are going to somehow come up with enough money to refinance this debt or to borrow more money. And I agree with you that it doesn't make any sense to borrow any more money, except for the problem is that the banks think we're going to pay it off, but we're not. So we need to stand up and say, you guys are bankrupt. I'm sorry, but all the taxes for all of my generations for the next 150 years would not pay enough to get you guys out of hock. You banks have blown it. So you are the ones that have to pay the price. You got to go through bankruptcy. If your paper isn't worth anything, then we're going to tear it up and throw it away. But we are not going to bear this burden for another generation in this country. We can't do it. So I submit that everything that you are saying and everything that I have studied indicates this country has got to force these banks into bankruptcy and start over.
Well, just again, studying the Federal Reserve System, that was arrangement that they made was that they control the printing press, and they can create money, um, uh, and they charge interest to the American taxpayer, and that we are that's the arrangement that they made. It's the same system that Paul Warburg was the one that wrote the Federal Reserve Act, and his brother Max Warburg wrote the same deal for the Reichsbank, and it's the same deal that the Bank of England has. So again, like trying to understand it, I don't know. Um, I don't know what the solution is, because again, like going back, like you can go back to the Venetian system, and it's the same groups. I mean, we were looking at that. You were talking about uh, Norman Montague, but if you look at like the Sun Fire Insurance, which was Nathan Rothschild, it was Monty. Let's see, Monty. Fiore was his last name. And that was the Italian. So it makes me wonder, again, does this go back to, the same groups running the Venetian banks that then, go up to Hamburg and then to Amsterdam, and I think it is. But again, it's like trying to figure out who they are. It's, Warburg is a very, big name to know. Jacob Schiff is another one that was a Kuhn and Loeb key person. But as far as fixing it, like I have to admit that I was somebody like that when I was in high school. I would read the Warren Buffett books about um, studying, reading your 10K, and learning how to do financial statement analysis, and the whole what's his name, Graham from Columbia, basically talking about value investing. But when I got into the working world in 2000, that was when the internet bubble had just sort of burst, and I was working at Munder Capital, and basically the analysis just changed. Like the whole concept of financial statement analysis and doing valuation was thrown away for the idea of these tech companies have potential that you can't measure, and you just have to sort of believe again in their future earnings potential, and just cast aside the idea of understanding different metrics for measuring financial strength. And I love learning those things, and when I applied them to our own government, it was I could tell that even then that it was just way it was so far beyond anything that could ever be payable, especially when understand compounding interest, especially with a asset or a debt level of that magnitude. It's just an impossible situation. So again, like I feel like I don't have a great solution. I would love to just say that the Bank of England needs to go bankrupt, but again, it's 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 hard to I don't know. I mean, I like to study like the Dutch tulips in the South Sea bubbles and all of the those transitions. From what I understand, most of the time when they do a massive event like that, it's to basically take over the exchanges. They had the sugar exchange, and then the cotton exchange was the um the the French East India Company going bankrupt, and then they sold the Louisiana Purchase to finance the Bonaparte. So again, I don't. It's a complicated thing. I'd love to contribute to try to solve it, but I just feel like it's dire. We obviously need to have a you can't just pot shot at all the problems, because there's so many. I mean, you do need to come up with a solution. I mean, I think the idea of infrastructure building is needed. I mean, if you look at what we have now, I mean, all of that debt and not much to show for it, is really a depressing situation. So again, just trying to understand how how this Federal Reserve fiat currency system works. I don't think that the cryptocurrencies is the answer. Because again, I think of the crypto as the same, cover stories that they use for like a Microsoft or a eBay or a Amazon, where they want to say it's one guy that figured it out over a weekend. Where these are large groups that are organizing this, and to think that it's not the Bank of England that's financing the idea of doing cryptocurrency. I mean, you're reading about the Knights Templar. I mean, they were the original bankers that created checks, and the system was that people didn't want to be on the pilgrimages with their assets, with their coin on them, so they would go to the temple and they would create a check and they would encrypt it. And those are the same people that became the bankers. So these are, to think that it's a groups outside of those same old powerhouse banks, I think is I don't, it would take a lot of argument for me to believe that. But I want to come up with solutions, because again, I don't want to just be somebody that just criticizes everything. So I'm trying to gather information now, but I don't feel like I have a great answer.
Well, geez, I thought you'd just buy into my answer and we'd all just go home and say,
I,
hey, we've solved everything.
yeah, I wish it
Well,
was easy as the pitchforks at the at the gates of the Bank of England, but I don't know if that would do.
yeah. Well, well, I know one thing, you're going to keep studying it and you're going to keep on helping us understand it as you do. Your your grasp already is so far ahead of most people, and you can't measure yourself by what other people think, even if it's family anymore. I can't talk to my family about it, and even my dear sweet wife, who by the way is much better now, and just really doing good. Anyway, but with her, we can only go so far. I can start talking about a subject, but there comes a point where I realize, it's going to, before I make my point, I'm going to have put in too many details and too much
Yeah.
predicate, and I'm not going to get to the conclusion before she loses interest. And it's because it's just darn hard to do this, as you say, and I know what you mean about family, and I certainly sympathize with you, but you're doing great work, and you're going to uh, learn enough to feel more confident about your opinions as time goes on. Um, Thanks for being with us again, David. It's really a pleasure, and gosh, I learned a lot from you tonight, as I do every night. So yeah, be of good cheer, and keep up the
I
good
wish
fight.
I wish I had a happy you know way to tell it, but it's I'm trying to figure that out as I go. So hopefully that'll come.
Yeah, that's what it says. The truth will set us free. We just have to find it. Thanks very much again. Good night, everybody.
Good night.